Are you looking for a way to help your brick-and-mortar business drive more traffic and increase your sales? Look no further than the Receipt Paper Podcast. In this podcast, Joanne and Kyle provide their sage advice on how to make your brick-and-mortar store the hottest spot in town. Whether you're just launching a new business or trying to grow an existing one, these informative episodes will leave you inspired. In each episode, Joanne and Kyle take on a different topic related to running a successful business. They offer practical tips based on their own experience as owners of multiple brick-and-mortar locations. So whatever challenges you're facing, they have actionable advice for you. From finding a location and executing your build-out, to merchandising and customer experience, to sales and marketing, Joanne and Kyle have you covered. With helpful advice from these experienced entrepreneurs, you are sure to learn how to increase your sales and have your business running out of receipt paper in no time. Let's dive right in.
Welcome to the Receipt Paper Podcast. I am so excited for today. We have special guest Tracy Gunn with us, the founder of Get Exitable. Tracy, how are we doing today?
I'm fabulous. How are you? I'm so glad to be here.
Yes, this is going to be a great topic, one that I don't think a lot of people new to the brick and mortar business world are already thinking about. So I'm excited for your insight today.
Well, thank you for giving me the chance to talk about it because, I love to share my cautionary tale, right? So,
yes.
yay.
Start there. Yeah. I'd love to hear your background. How did you get here to teaching people about exiting?
So basically, we'll start this. When I was growing up, my dad had a convenience store attached to his house, right? Up in upstate New York. My mom worked in a grocery store. He had worked in a grocery store. They divorced. And so I always went to work with them. I always was in customer service. I always, when he had his store, I worked in it. I knew how to fill coolers and rotate stock and things that maybe not everybody knows, but I always knew. So and then I had children. I stayed home. I homeschooled for 14. Well, I stayed home for 14 years, homeschooled. My kids decided to go to school and everything kind of spun out. My ex was in 9/11 and he kind of had some health things. And all of a sudden I was everything was in chaos. I was I'll start a business because, that's the perfect time. And so, but I was creating a world that I got to control. And I loved betting on me, knowing that if it, rose or fell, it was because of me, not anybody else's choices. And I love the idea of if the answer for me. And so that's kind of how I started. And people are in all that chaos, I'm yeah, because you know what? It was something I could control, right? If it's a me problem, I could do that. I can't control everybody else. So I started my candy store and kind of got that really working pretty well and without me. And then I was I'm kind of bored. Should I get a job? What should I do? And so I decided to start a restaurant because that's easy. And then I did another restaurant. And then, so by 2019, I had 2 candy stores and 2 restaurants in my town. And I had 42 staff. And all of a sudden, one day, my daughter had a baby. I mean, it wasn't immaculate conception or anything, but it was just all of a sudden, her having that baby made me change gears. And I was I don't want to be here anymore. I want to be there. And I was I'm going to sell and I'll just get out of here. Right. I was tired. I was running everything. I wasn't obviously 42 staff. I wasn't doing everything, but I was still overseeing everything. And I was tired. And so anyway, long story short is I asked a broker friend to help me sell because he was going to fix everything and find me a buyer and it'd be easy peasy, right? Everybody, I just thought I'll just sell, whatever. Yeah. And after a few days, he came back and's there's nothing worth selling here. And I had, over $1 million in sales and I had 42 staff and customers and my candy store had been in business at that point, 13 years. There was longevity, there were proven systems. So I was just surprised that now there's a lot of reasons why I didn't, but the gist of it was I could have just believed him and liquidated everything, which is what a lot of people do. They hit that wall and they're I'm done. I'd pay somebody to take this, but if nobody wants it, I'm out of here. And they will liquidate. But I thought, well, maybe I could fix some things. Maybe there's something I'm missing, right? I figure I'm like pretty smart. I'm running all these businesses. I could maybe fix some things. So I gave myself 6 months to fix some things. And within 3 months, I was not hating my life as much. That's number one. But number two,
Yeah.
I found a buyer for one of
Nice.
them. And I was like, holy mackerel, why didn't I know about this when I started?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like how I wound up help as I exited the other businesses. I still have the candy store for a different reason, but like the point was is I was like, I want to be that person that warns people. Like I was like, how come nobody told me this stuff? Why
Yeah.
didn't I think of this stuff? Like
Yeah.
how did I miss this important piece? Like what makes a valuable business? What makes it
Yeah.
transfer? Like why did I miss? So anyway, so that's kind of how I started this part of my life, right? Um,
Yeah.
and it's been like super rewarding. I love business owners because we're like all kind of the same spirit, right? We're like eternally optimistic, even when it's unrealistic. Um, but we also like load ourselves up and have really bad days where on the right day, we could just get in the car and drive away and never come back. Right.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so much of this exiting talk really helps filter your business and your choices so that you never have those kind of days.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of my very short story, long story about how I wound up here. And that's why I think it's like so great that you gave me the chance to be able to talk to people who are starting their business or in the beginning stages of their
Yeah.
business, because these are things that I wish someone had told me, now 17 years ago, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
how you set it up at the beginning will, if you give it some thought, will really support what you actually want as
Yeah.
opposed to reacting to everything. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so important. I think many of us, me myself included, when we first get started, we're just thinking about getting the doors open and just growing and just making money. We're not thinking about, am I going to sell this business
Right.
ever down the road? So yeah, and then all of a sudden, you get 13 years down the road and you're like, oh gosh, I want to sell. And
And
yeah,
sorry, right? Because I mean, well, I saw this statistic recently that just really, again, it's one of those. There's a lot of eye-opening statistics about selling and businesses and what happens to them and how many people are selling and all of that. But one of them was that for business owners, 80% of our net worth is usually tied up in our business. And so if that business just liquidates, you're losing probably 75% of your net worth. And many of us, this is our retirement plan. Like this thing we've built is probably going to fund retirement or the next thing. And so, right, because that's why we give it so much, right? We like our children, right? We give birth to it, we nurture them, and then eventually it's supposed to take care of us too,
yeah,
right? Not just us giving to it. And the long-term goal is for most of us is like, I want it to be able to be my big wealth transference someday,
yeah,
right? But if you don't plan with that in mind, you'd be like me, where he's like, just liquidate it, just give it
yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah. How heartbreaking.
It
Yeah,
was, I did cry. I cried.
yeah.
I cried. And then I was like, well, again,
Well,
eternally optimistic. I was like, maybe I could fix some things, right? And I did. I mean, it's not as hard as you think. It's just the biggest shift for me was instead of always more, right? Get more people in the door, grow, do like I shifted from that to making it sellable. And it just, I worked probably less, but I just started looking at it through different eyeballs,
yeah,
right? Not all
yeah,
the opportunities the business had, but how the opportunities I had to get
yeah,
myself out, right?
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
just a
So
shift.
talk us through that. What did it look like to prepare your business when you went from, your business being completely unsellable to all of a
Yeah.
sudden you had a buyer? What did that look like?
So, and because I had one that was 6,500 square feet. So that had the bulk of my staff. So it was a very large restaurant catering attached to a hotel. We did wedding, like it was big. Like the
Wow.
bar sat 40. So it was my biggest headache. It was the one that I was
Wow.
up till 1 or 2 in the morning because we had live music and that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So I just said, well, I'm going to pick one, the big one, the biggest,
Yeah.
had the most revenues, but also the most working parts. And I thought, all right, first of all, like, why am I wrong? Like, why do I think there's value here and he thinks there's not? So that was step number one, was like, what am I missing? Right?
Yeah.
Because most of us, we're attached, obviously. We built it, we know the ins and outs, but we're not looking with buyer eyeballs. We're looking with our own, which, like even with our children, right? We look at them, we know their flaws, right? But we love them anyway, right? And we're
Yeah.
not giving them to anybody. So, but the same kind of thing, like I was looking at my business like the owner and not why would somebody want to buy this business. So I really had to take a deep dive for me and think about, okay, why does he not see what I think is here? And is he wrong or am I wrong or both? So that was kind of how I started after I cried and after I decided, okay, I can do anything for 6 months, right? It's like my husband took me, what do you call it, hang gliding once.
Yes.
And he went up first, and you're in this thing in the sleeping bag, like hanging and whatever. And I was like, I could do anything for 20 minutes. I could do anything for 20. So that's kind of the attitude I had about my business because I was tired and I still was running all of them and it felt hopeless. But I was like, I could do anything in bite-sized pieces for 6 months. And if in 6 months he's right and there's nothing to sell here, I give myself permission to have tried and move on. But I didn't
Yeah.
want to just give in, right? So I started to think about it like, what am I missing? What is he seeing or not seeing that I see or don't see, right? Where is the disconnect? So for me, it started like, I didn't even know what my business was worth or
Yeah.
even how to figure it out. So I did some research on that. Or like, what makes the business valuable? Now, again, that does depend on the buyer, but like this was a big restaurant with a lot of moving pieces, a very expensive rent. So that was going to have to be probably somebody who wanted to expand their restaurant. Probably wasn't going to be somebody who was a first-time business buyer, but actually turned out to be. But like, yeah, right. But you just don't know. But when you start to
Yeah.
think about like, if Johnny down the road has a small restaurant and he wants to go big, right? And he's got his processes, he doesn't care about my processes, right? Because he's going to bring that in. So I didn't have to fix those things necessary for him, right? If I was thinking about who the buyer is. So I started to think about who might want to buy this and what are they going to be looking for? Like, yeah, sure. Would they like profit? Sure. Restaurants in the hard industry, small profits, narrow margins. But, what else is he going to be looking for? So I mean, this is not, when I started, it wasn't like I'm this big fancy exit planning lady. And right, I was just thinking practically, what are they looking for? I mean,
Yeah.
most people, if they're going to invest money into a business, they want something that makes them some money
Yeah.
and they probably don't want to buy my job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do I fix those two things? And that's kind of the basics of how I started. And so I did some quick, easy things. I did like a time diary for me. Like, what am I spending all my time on? What are some things that I could teach somebody once and never have to do again? And what are some things that I really hate doing and never want to do again? Right. So you can start with either of those. But I just kind of made a list of what am I doing every day and
Yeah.
how could I be doing things differently? Right.
Yeah.
Um, that's kind of how I started. And then I just like there are some really quick wins that I wound up. Like, for example, I thought about, okay, I don't really know who my average customer is because I wasn't really tracking it. Now I had a customer, my candy store, I had a birthday club, so I had a list of people to talk to, but at the restaurant, I never did that. Well,
Yeah.
in my point of sale, I had a loyalty program that I just had to turn on.
Mhm.
And then I taught my girls, much like Longhorn or somewhere else, that if they offered a free appetizer, they'd give us their information. So and then magic within 30 days, I had a list of people who came
Yeah.
regularly, signed up. I knew how much they spent, what the cost, like all of a sudden I had a value,
Yeah.
right? That I just in the process prior, again, fourth business, I just wasn't thinking about it, right? I was doing all the other things.
Yeah.
Or I taught somebody, one of my staff had I never understood how to do liquor inventory because they're bottles. Like, how do you do it? And
Mhm.
so one of my staff who was in my kitchen already, she knew how to do it. So I gave her 5 extra hours a week. She
Yeah.
created a whole system, did it for me, worth every $100, like every week, and then
Yeah.
found theft. And all of a sudden, I got rid
Um,
of some problems and I was more profitable. So, like, these
yeah.
little changes
Mhm.
affected everything, but also released time for me. So, made me
Yeah.
more money, made it more transferable, and it made, and it got me out of it, right? And so, those like little things, I mean, those just like little things like tech, turn it
Yeah.
on. Like that was it. I had some business cards made, taught the
Yeah.
servers, right? Hey, tell them we're giving them something free today. They don't even have to wait till next time, right?
Right.
And they did it. Well, I mean, of course they're going to do it. They were getting tipped, right? So like,
Yeah.
but that didn't take me any time at all.
Right.
But
Right.
all of a sudden I had something of value, right? Because even if I closed, somebody might want my customer list.
Oh, yeah. Customer data is so valuable these days.
Right. So
Sure.
like those kind of things. So like it doesn't have to be these, when you think about it, like this big thing, I've got to overhaul everything. It's just about taking like the little things that maybe it's something you hate doing that you just want off your plate. Like, and
Yeah.
who do you know in your, or how can you outsource? Or is there tech that will take care of it? Or some combo of those things, right? Is there a system? Is there a person? Is there tech? Some combo of that could take care of much of what you're doing already.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
love
kind
it.
of how I started. And so, and it just, it kind of becomes addicting. Like,
Yeah.
it starts like a little snowball at the top of the hill. And I'm like, ooh, I have an extra hour a day. Woo, let's do more of that. And it starts to get bigger and bigger. And it's so like, I think it's fun because you're like, oh, I don't have to ever do that again.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah. That's huge.
it changes how you look at it, right? It doesn't,
Yeah.
nobody's like, woo, SOPs. But
Yeah.
if you thought, if I could do a really good SOP or dashboard for my business or something, so I never have to train anybody again. If I
Yeah.
never have to, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I can see who's doing what they're, and I don't have to micromanage everything. Like, okay, even if it took me a couple weeks,
Mhm.
a payback of that and
Yeah.
the value to the person who doesn't want to buy my job. Because that's like a big one. Most of us own jobs, not
Yeah.
businesses, right?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Yeah. You'd almost want to keep the business after that. Your life would
Well,
be
I
so
did.
much.
Well, that's what happened. A couple months in, I was like, I don't really hate this as much, maybe. Like, and that's the other part of this, like with Exitable, is that, many of the people go through the process, even if, because it is hard to find a buyer. There's so many businesses that are going to be for sale. The boomers are all retiring. They're not ready. A lot of them will just disappear. Like, there's opportunity everywhere in this.
Yeah.
But if you didn't find a buyer and you've
Mhm.
worked yourself out of it, maybe
Yeah.
it's not in your best interest to sell anyway, because
Right.
now you finally get all the benefits without having to do the work.
Yes.
Instead
Right.
of getting your 1 day payday, you get your every year payday, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so it just gives you options. And I like love the idea that as owners, where we often can feel very trapped and stuck in it, right? That
Yeah.
we could feel free enough to have choices about what
Yes.
we want and what that looks like. Because I'll give you a funny hint is that like most people who sell or close do another one,
Yeah.
kind of in our DNA,
Yeah. For
right?
sure. For sure. You see that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, maybe they don't, or maybe they have somebody earn in and they retain half ownership.
Hmm.
Maybe that, like, there's just so many ways to do it. But if you never think about that end and what you
Yeah.
think you want,
Yeah.
right? And it's just as simple as like, will I want to sell this someday? Okay.
Mhm.
Well, it's probably, if I do, it's probably in my best interest that as I'm building to think about, does this make my business more valuable or less valuable? All the
Yeah.
things we do, right? Does this increase my value? Does it make it easier to buy or harder to buy? Like though just knowing what you think you want eventually helps now filter what you're doing every day.
Right.
Just by
Right.
identifying it. And so again, but most of us are so busy in and doing
Yeah.
that we just never think about that. And we're just getting through today. We're getting through the holidays, we're getting through,
Yes. Yeah.
budgeting. Like how I think about this every time we have like a new group of people coming in, I'm like, okay, how many of us for years, like raise your hand if you said every year you were going to do a budget and stick to it and never did. Like
Yep.
that's most people, right? We have
Yep.
books with all these reports, and most of the time, do we look at them?
Yeah.
Right. Right. Because we know, like we know in our bank accounts usually, unless we have a bookkeeper, but we're knowing what things cost. We know
Yeah.
about what things. So unless something's glaring obvious,
Mhm.
like jumping out at us, like all of a sudden we're like, why am I negative? What happened? Right? We're not analyzing those things. We're not taking that analytical approach because we're in it and we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not bad, but
Mhm.
if you ever want to sell, it's probably something that you should work on or come up with a plan for,
Yeah. Absolutely.
right?
These are great suggestions. I
Yeah.
love these.
Oh, I'm
I
so
know. Yeah, go ahead.
no, go no, you go ahead. I was like, I'm so glad that you like because I know this is not sexy talk, but when you start to think about like sexy talk is making money, saying you sold your
Yeah.
business, having freedom to do whatever you want. Like how many business I did this in one of my VSLs, like how many of us have like bought into this idea of the American dream, right? We can change our
Yeah.
stars, we can build this life for ourselves, we can have this freedom, we can make all this money. And how many of us actually know somebody who's actually done it?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very, very rare. And
Yeah.
like, how many of us know someone phoning it in from Tahiti? Nobody, right? And the thing is like, and we feel badly about it, but we don't know how to do anything different. We don't know how to, because nobody taught us to do
Yeah.
these things, right? Um,
Mhm.
and that is, I would say, 95% of the people who own businesses is that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I just read a book about what the founder of Dry Bar who sold her business for like
Mhm.
250 million. Just it was
Mm,
an insane story, but um, you know, you see so much that people kind of get this founder syndrome where they, their business is their baby and they want to hold on to it forever
right.
and they, don't know like when to sell and they wind up, missing kind of that mark and then their business isn't worth anything. So how do you know when your business or when you should sell your business? Do you have any insight there on?
Well, I mean, I think if it aligns with what you want, right? And so again, so we take it, we kind of do it in a three steps process. And more often than not, it's not people at the beginning, which I'm so glad we get to talk to like your audience because they are at the like this is the perfect time, right? But most of them are like 30, 40 years in, they're 70 and they're tired. And now they're realizing, okay, it's probably time to think. And they've done
Yeah.
no planning. They are the business. Was their whole game plan was to have this business sell and they're up against it now. And if they get the right broker or wrong broker, they're just going to close, which is not good for our economy, not good for them. So there are things you can do. And it really, again, so we take them through like, what do you want? And when do you
Mm.
like, what do you want? When do you want it? What does it look like? Who might you want to sell to? Like those very basic
Yeah.
questions to think about. Like, I
Yeah.
want, and again, this is not locked in, but you got to have a target you're aiming for, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like if they have this 1 in 60 rule for pilots, and it's like, if they are constantly readjusting to stay on course because they know they're trying to hit LA. But if they don't, they could be in South America. Like they go to Florida, like completely the wrong direction, just because they're not course correcting based on where they want to go. It's always driven by where they want to go. And so we had people to really, for the first time, maybe ever, is really just put it on paper. Like, this is, I think, what I want, right? And it
Mhm.
can change. But then
Yeah.
we also talk about, okay, what is your business worth today? This is not your final number, but like, let's look at it. Let's do it. Let's do the math. And
Mhm.
if it's worth nothing, right, based on profitability, and we like add back in based on like owners and extra expenses. We use the tax code to our advantages and like all that, right? We adjust.
Mm.
And if it's not worth a lot, it's okay because you
Mhm.
can fix things. You can
Mhm.
build other assets that will have value. And if you identify, like, let's just say we talked about that restaurant guy, but I have a guy I just talked to recently. He had three companies, but one of them was an oil company, an oil delivery company. He's had customers for 40 years. He wants to sell. I mean, come on. He's in Boston area. Every oil delivery company wants that list.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
How often do you shop around? You just get on it and you stay, right? And so that is worth, they may not want his trucks, they may not want his systems, but they certainly want that list to pull in. Now he's profitable and he could sell for money, and that list and the value of that list, because he has those numbers, make it worth a lot to those people and worth the acquisition. Um,
Yeah.
but even if he wasn't making a ton, they'd still want his list.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? A list of all these people, because the most expensive thing is acquiring the customer,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so for a lot of these owners, so we go through like, what is your business worth? And what do you need it to be worth, right? If they're retiring, they need it to be worth some amount.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, we have where you are. We know what you want. We have where you are. We know where you want to be. How do we get there? Right? And it always for us, so that's kind of how we do it. And then we kind of build a map to get them there. And
Mm.
it always starts with, let's do a time diary. Let's fix the basics. Let's get the core working. Let's
Yeah.
fire you, get exitable. Then we can work on, okay, I mean, a lot of these people have never raised prices in years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, so all of a sudden they could make an adjustment and all of a sudden be way more profitable,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
they just haven't raised prices, or they've been paying somebody to do something and there's an automation that can do it for them. And then all of a sudden
Right.
they don't need that person for 20,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of ways you can tweak it once you have something that's not going to fall apart without you.
Right. Right.
Right. So that's kind of where we start. And then we kind of work on the fun part is like, okay, what can we turn on? What levers can we pull to make this like be more?
Mhm.
And they get a little taste of that. First of all, when they fire themselves, they get really excited because like they're like,
Yeah.
why have I not done this before?
Oh,
So,
right.
right, 30, 40 years. But
Yeah.
then after that, it's like, okay, like, and there's like a lot of strategy. You could acquire another business. Now you're two businesses, and now you're part of valuing is the profitability times a multiple. And it's like, how risky is the business? So usually businesses that have a profit level under 200,000 profit, they are usually a 1 to 1.5x. So that business might be worth, if it was 200,000, it'd be worth 200 to 300,000, right? It's
Okay.
because, but the higher the profit is, the more valuable that business is. So then the higher it goes and the more exitable it is, right? If it's not a job, now it's worth 3 or 4, 5x, all the way up. And then because somebody could just buy it and it's going to keep going. They don't need
Yeah.
to do anything. They could
Yeah.
actually maybe raise some prices and make it even more valuable, right?
Mhm.
And so, but by having multiple businesses, so that was a strategy for one of our guys. Like all of his friends were retiring and thinking about selling. So part of the strategy was like, I'm going to buy up their businesses, put them into mine. Now I've got four. My customer, like all of a sudden, I'm now instead of being worth 1x, I'm worth 3x. And I didn't have
Mhm.
to do anything, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
just a strategy. And not everybody wants to do that,
Mhm.
but it's
Yeah.
just a way, right, to make it. That's what a lot of these you probably have seen. Like HVAC is a big one right now that everyone's trying to scoop up HVAC companies to put them all together,
Really?
because when you put hundreds of them together, it's worth 10, 30x what they are
Mhm.
individually. It's just
Okay.
like they just bring them all in. They actually make them more profitable because they all have like
Yeah.
one central hub instead of
Yeah.
30 hubs. And then they just all of a sudden now they have this big conglomerate that is worth way more. And then a big guy will come and buy them for
Yeah.
30x instead of
Yeah.
1x. So there's a
Wow.
lot of ways to do that, that's where it gets kind of fun and exciting.
Yeah.
It's like playing. Um,
Yeah.
but step one is to figure out what you want. Step two is where are you? And number three
Mhm.
is like, where do you want to go? And then, okay, let's get you fired. That's
Yeah.
really kind of how it starts. And I mean, anybody can do that. Like, obviously, we've done it before, so it's a little bit easier to plug into that, right?
Yeah.
But I did it by myself while running three other businesses,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's just the logic part of it. It's like, okay, what could I easily give away today,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? So there's so many different ways, and but like, and when you're starting, it's so much easier to build with that in mind.
I think that's huge. I think starting with the end in mind is so valuable. I mean, I think about when I was just starting out, and I mean, if I knew, what was that number that I'm going to want down the road,
Yeah.
and how can I start building my business today to meet that? I mean,
Mhm.
I think that's so much more productive than
Yeah, then
to
trying
think,
all the things, right? Well, maybe I'll
yeah,
do this. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll do
yes,
like maybe this will bring more customers in. Maybe like, but
yeah,
maybe sometimes it's just time to stop and solidify the foundation.
yeah,
You
yeah,
could do those things, right? That's true for scaling too. I mean, there's an element of scaling in what we're talking about, but scaling with the plan for exit is a little bit different, but it's still scaling. And like
yeah,
you said, you could change your mind. You could decide,
yeah,
hey, I like all this money and freedom.
yeah,
I'm in. I'm staying
yeah,
for another 5 years, right? Or you're going to
right.
just wait for the right person
Yeah, right.
instead
Well,
of
and then you have the
desperation.
idea, this is what my business is actually worth. I think so many of us don't even know that, like
Or
what
how
our
to
business.
figure it out.
Yeah,
How do you
right.
build a valuable business if you don't know what makes it valuable?
Yeah,
This
like,
is why I was like, what's wrong with me? Why didn't I think about that? Like,
I
I
know.
feel I'm running four businesses. I'm a pretty smart gal. How come I didn't think about that?
Yes.
I
Oh,
mean, it's just because you just don't think you're busy running your business. It's just not, it's like, okay, yeah, eventually. Yeah, yeah. So
yeah,
I love the idea of an exit plan. And it's, again, it doesn't have to be a big, elaborate thing, but it could be just like, and it's the perfect time of year, right? It's the beginning of the year, it's like end of 2023, beginning of 24, like depending on when you're listening, when people are listening. But like, it's a great time to just be like, what do I really want? You're on a
yeah,
plane and you're stuck for 4 hours on a plane. Start to think about like,
yeah.
how
I
do I know
think
when
it's
I'm done?
yeah. What's your 2-year plan, 3-year, 5-year, and where does exiting sit in that, right? I
How do
think
you, I mean, and if you never set that, how do you know if you're at the finish line?
yeah. Oh,
I mean, right? And how do you get there if you don't
right.
know what you're building it for or for? And I do think like a key component of that is like who might want to buy it? Like, obviously if it's completely exitable and it stands on its own, anybody could buy it, right? It's
Mhm.
valuable in itself.
Yeah.
But you're at the end of your entrepreneurial life and you just want like it to be attractive to someone who's buying up businesses, right? Well, then you're going to focus on some different things, right? It'd be nice to get the systems working well,
Yeah.
but it's not as important because
Mm.
they have their own systems,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so identifying who might want to buy your business. And it's like, if you had a house for sale and you wanted to like, and you were near the dog park and you wanted to like make it attractive to dog owners, right? You would gear it towards that. The pictures would be geared to that. You'd include the dog bed, you would
Right.
market it that way. And so in the same way, as you're building out your business, you could be thinking about, that person, right?
Right.
That conglomerate, that franchise, that whatever,
Yeah.
right? Could
Huge.
easily just scoop this in and make it part of theirs and take care of my customers, but also pay me, right?
I love it. I
Yeah.
love.
So
Oh,
that, I mean, it's fun. It's just fun stuff to talk about.
yeah, I know
I
it
think
really puts
so.
your business in a totally different perspective.
Yeah.
And I think it helps you kind of see that vision. I think a lot of us out there don't even think about selling our business as an option. And it
Right.
really, truly is. And you don't want to wait until, you're in a bind and need to
Yeah.
sell your,
Well, I was
right?
on a call today. I'm looking to open my grandchildren are in Charlotte. So I have one that I'm opening, I believe in May. And then I had another one today, but they were like, they're building out a year or two, but they have somebody on their main street who's sick with cancer
Oh,
and she
no.
can't operate. And so she needs to get out.
Yeah.
And these kind of things happen. I mean,
Yeah.
like it's terrible. And I felt,
Yeah.
but they also need to have an operating business in there. And so there's nothing to sell because she probably was the business. And so, that's like the saddest thing is like, you have something that's been a stakeholder on your main street, especially retail, like for decades. And all of a
Right.
sudden it's just gone. And it's like the value that it had is just poof, it disappears because it's gone. And so, I would behoove people to like think about that. Like,
Yeah.
some people don't want their legacy to live on. They don't want anybody else messing up what they built. That's fine. Well, then maybe you have somebody earn in or you get it professionalized so that you don't have to run it,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like, and then you can own it forever. And when you're done, right? And you've made all the money you needed to, right? I've had people who are like, I don't want to put any more work into this. I'm going to close and I'm just going to do it. Okay. But you're doing that knowing the numbers. You're doing that
Yeah.
knowing your
Yeah.
options. And then you're
Right.
making an
Not like you
informed
missed out on anything. Yeah.
correct. It's not desperation. I can't do anything else. It's I'm going to make a calculated decision to enjoy. Like I had a restaurant guy um, in Jersey, and it was after COVID, and so like his numbers weren't great.
Yeah.
But he did mostly catering, so like they
Yeah.
didn't do that for years down in Jersey. And
Yeah.
so, but he was like, I'm going to enjoy my last year
Mhm.
and go
Love it.
35 years, and I was like, really? Because it hurt my heart because I was like, you could do so many things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was like, I'm good. Like my brother and I, we have homes, we have lives, it's enough. And I was like, good enough. Like good
Yeah.
for him. But he
Yeah.
did the research. He figured out what his options were. He figured out what
Right.
are the first things. Like what the broker should have told me was, okay, here you go, Tracy. And most brokers won't do this, but like he should have said, listen, it's very dependent on you. There's not a ton of profit. This is going to be a hard sell. Restaurants are hard. So you could fix some things,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Or you can liquidate. Like he could have been a little gentler, a little bit nicer, and
Yes.
given me some direction about like, this is how we calculate what it's worth. This is blah, blah, blah. Like he could have, but most
Yeah.
brokers won't do that.
Yeah.
And we have like this whole outreach we're trying to connect with brokers. So instead of them doing what mine did to me,
Yeah.
because a lot of people
Yeah.
just hear that and they're like, well, it's hopeless. I'll just close.
Yeah.
And it could be saved, right?
Yeah.
Um, and
That's
so
awesome.
like if they just change their language a little, they could have something sellable. Mm.
That's awesome.
So
That's
anyway, but yeah, I mean, I love this stuff. And I love, I want small business owners to win. We work so hard,
yes.
we're like superheroes, I think. And it's like
Ah,
we should win in the end. And if it took
right.
just a little bit of planning, a little bit, like this is not like you don't have to redo everything, but just have a plan of like where you're going. Like where you're going on vacation, you probably know that, right? And
So
so,
valuable. Yeah.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah. I think you've got the wheels turning for everyone. Definitely
I
for
hope
me.
so. I'm glad.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Tracy, how can people work with you? What do you do for people in their businesses?
So we do, if you go to getexitable.com, that has some free resources just to kind of get you started. Because I think the perfect person to work with us is someone who's kind of gone through like I did, who's gone through it and like, crap, I have a problem,
Ah,
right? And
yeah.
because we spend a lot of our time really trying to teach people, like, you have a problem you don't even know,
Yeah.
right? And so, because there's a stat, 1 in 9, 1 out of 10 will sell businesses that are listed. 1 out of 10. It's not a
Interesting.
very good number.
No.
And the second stat is that there's 12 million baby boomer small business owners who are retiring in the next 3 to 5 years.
Mhm.
They're just done, and most of them won't sell. So there's a huge opportunity to buy businesses,
Yeah.
but most of the businesses are not great businesses because they're very dependent on the owners. So they have this dichotomy here of like trying to reach the people before they quit and just say, forget it, right? So anyway, I got off track, but like there's this whole, so most businesses won't sell because most businesses are not really ready to be sold.
Yeah.
And there's a huge amount of them that are getting ready to be sold. So like this is the perfect time, whether you're starting, you're in the middle, or you're at the end. This
Yeah.
is the time to just at
Yeah.
least think about it so you're prepared.
Yeah.
And not like these guys, like some of these guys, 50 years in their business.
Yeah.
And they're like, I should have done this a long time ago. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's not hopeless. It's just, So anyway, there's a lot of educational stuff. That was my whole point. On that homepage has some free resources to use, to try, just to figure out your numbers and see where you are and understand a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I encourage you all to go check them out. I will put a link to that, getexitable.com. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I don't think you're ever too early to start thinking about this with your business. And I think your insight today was really valuable for all of us, Tracy. So appreciate it.
I'm so glad. Thanks. And I hope and again, feel free. Like, I think there's a way to reach out to me on that. Just like if you have a question, like I didn't understand this, I'm happy to talk to you about it. Like just send me an email and I'll respond and give you some resources or training or whatever. So thank you for the opportunity to chat. I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thanks for tuning in to the Receipt Paper Podcast, your go-to source of information for starting and growing a successful brick-and-mortar business. Subscribe to hear future episodes and share this content so that more people can access these valuable insights. If you're looking for more resources to help you with your brick-and-mortar business, visit masterbrickandmortar.com or follow us on Instagram at masterbrickandmortar. Thanks again for listening to the Receipt Paper Podcast. We'll see you in the next episode.